On our last episode, we interviewed a late life lesbian. While we feel it is important to incorporate these perspectives into the podcast on occasion, we heard you loud and clear that this was a tough episode to listen to, especially for straight husbands. We listened to your feedback, and we hope that today's episode provides a critical counterbalance to our last episode. Hey everyone, welcome to Our Voices, the podcast for straight partners and partners of trans people by Our Path. I'm your host, Kristen Kalbley. Our guest today is Wade Ferris. Wade is originally from North Carolina and has lived in Minnesota since 2000. He's been a father for 22 years and has been a business owner for 14 years. He discovered he was a straight spouse in early 2021. He's currently writing a book about the straight spouse experience. Welcome to the podcast, Wade. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Kristen. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, so you and I have chatted on the phone before a little bit, and today we're just here to tell your story. And so I just want to start from the beginning. How did you meet your wife, and how long ago was that? And then we'll just take it as it unfolds.
Okay. So I originally moved to Minnesota from North Carolina in 1998. I came here to go to a small Bible college in downtown Minneapolis. And I met my wife there. We actually met on the first or second day of school and talked a little bit over the course of the first semester. But we started dating in the middle of the second semester. And it was kind of an on again, off again thing for, I guess, a few weeks. But eventually we started dating a little more seriously. And so at the end of the second semester, I went back to North Carolina for the summer. I worked for my father in a construction business there. And I thought that we kind of left things as a long distance relationship. And that's definitely the way it ended from my perspective. About a month after I had moved back to North Carolina, I was telling her that I was on the phone. I was telling her that I was talking to some of my friends about how I felt about her. And I told her that I was thinking of asking her to marry me. And so I kind of did then. And she said yes. And a week later, she flew down and we kind of formally in person got engaged. And then she flew back to Minnesota. And at the end of the summer, I came back to go to school. Had a few problems with my financial aid because I didn't really understand the process. And so I ended up dropping out of school in my second year, and we got married that fall. And then we moved to North Carolina for another year just to have time away from family and stuff like that, or away from, I guess, specifically her family. That was her preference. And then we came back to Minnesota, and we've lived here ever since.
Okay. And during any of that time, because we always have to ask this question, and straight spouses get asked this question a lot. During any of that time, was there anything that indicated to you that something might be a little off?
No.
Okay.
The interesting part about that is that she pursued a more physical and intimate relationship with me much more than I did with her.
Oh, okay.
I was so this was a Bible college, obviously, and so I'm a Christian. I'm not quite sure where I fall in that belief system at this moment, largely due to this experience. But I was pretty conservative with my physical relationships and stuff, and she was kind of really driving forward on that. She really actually pushed my boundaries quite a bit on that.
Okay. So you moved back to Minnesota, and then how long between when you got engaged and between then and the wedding and when you got married?
We got married at the end of November. So let's see, July to or June until November. So it's pretty short.
Okay. And so you get married, and how are things going early on in the marriage?
So at first, it seemed to be pretty great, actually. Kind of being in the church, I had always heard that when people get married, often the woman kind of loses her sexual desire. Um, I was looking back, that's a very strange thing for kids at a university to be talking about, but that was kind of the expectation that I had. And that was completely the opposite of what my experience was early on. We seem to have a very healthy relationship in that way.
Okay. Okay, so things are going good right off the bat, and I assume kids came along not too far after that?
That's correct. So we moved back to Minnesota just over a year after we had gotten married, and I think that was in December, and we got pregnant with our oldest daughter in January.
Okay. And so how many kids did you have altogether?
So I have 6 kids with my ex. We have them about every 2 to 3 years. So my oldest is currently 22. My youngest is currently 9 or 10.
Okay.
Sorry.
Got it. Okay. So just kind of taking the interim between that first kid and then before you found out that you were a straight spouse in 2021, there's a lapsed time in there of about how many years would you say?
About 18, 19 years.
18, 19 years. Okay. And during that duration of 18, 19 years, was there anything that was indicating that something was off with your spouse, or how did that interim go?
There did start to be what I guess now I can see were signs. Intimacy fell off quite early.
Was that, sorry, don't mean to interrupt, but
Nope.
with intimacy falling apart early, is that during the process of having kids? I mean, I can well imagine intimacy falling off when you got 6 kids running around. That seems like an expected, an understandable thing. So are we talking during that time, or are we talking after that time?
So it kind of it happened in a lot of different ways. So certainly physically, intimacy kind of fell off. We would still be together every couple weeks or something like that. But the reasons that I heard were that she was tired, she had a lot going on. There were the kids. She very much attached to our children, and so there wasn't a lot of separation there, and it always felt to me since the first year or so after our first daughter was born that I was really outside of that whole relationship. That she really bonded mostly with the kids, and I was kind of on this secondary plane in our relationship.
Okay.
But it wasn't just physically. So one example is the Valentine's Day after our first daughter was born. We were still young. We were in our early 20s. And so there wasn't a lot of money to go around. I concocted this whole plan to celebrate Valentine's Day. I knew that our daughter would still be with us and stuff, but I cooked this big dinner. I got gifts. I put on music and lit candles and all that kind of stuff. And when she came into the apartment with our daughter, she looked around at everything, and she had a look of horror on her face. Like, oh no, this is happening here, and I'm not interested. So yeah, things like that happened kind of regularly. I'm a pretty romantically inclined person. And so I really always wanted to make my spouse feel loved and special and desired and everything. And that just was never really reciprocated.
Okay. Never really received, let alone reciprocated, it sounds like.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So there's these little signs like that along the way as you're raising kids. And then when would you say things really started to get sus? To use a phrase that the kids are using lately. And I'm Gen X, so I probably shouldn't be saying that.
That's okay. I'm right there with you. Yeah, that's a really good question. Over the years, a couple things came up that I noticed. So the year that the song "I Kissed a Girl" from Katy Perry came out, she really kind of latched onto that song and kept listening to it. And it was really weird to me. She didn't provide any context to that or anything. There was another time where, I don't know, she made some comment about women's bodies, and I just kind of looked at her strangely, and she said, "Oh, come on, every woman has a little bit of lesbian in her." And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I didn't know that, but whatever. So a couple of things like that would come up now and then, but and looking back, I look at those things and I think, oh, I should have really taken that seriously. One other thing that I really didn't know what to do with was a couple of years before she kind of semi-officially came out to me, she had started making this joke about me having a girlfriend. And at one point she said that she didn't think that she could be enough for me, intimately, sexually, that kind of thing. And so if I wanted to go get a girlfriend, she was fine with it. And then she would...
How did you respond to that? I mean, that's a pretty big proposal. Like, that's essentially putting an open marriage on the table.
Yeah. It did not sit well with me at all. I'm not like that. I'm not interested in an open marriage. I want my one person, and I want that to be who I spend my life with and give my time and attention to. And so it almost felt like kind of like a trap too, because she had shown a lot of jealousy over things that didn't really make any sense to me. She seemed very possessive, but not specifically about me per se, more like she felt threatened.
Like, what's an example of something that she might have felt threatened by?
Let's see. So if I even talked to a woman that was semi-attractive, she would treat it like I was interested in her. There was one time when I was, I don't know, maybe 26, and I was working at a house. I was working in construction, and a young woman came into the room. I was on the phone with my supervisor, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that the woman came into the room wearing only a towel after a shower, and she proceeded to get dressed in the room. And I kept my eyes on the wall and told my supervisor to hang on, and I walked out of the house, told him what happened, and told him that I wanted to go work someplace else that day. And I kind of got reamed out for it from my supervisor because it was a huge hassle for him. Well, I get off the phone with him and I call my wife immediately. And I say, hey, I just wanted you to know this is what just happened and this is what I did. And she didn't speak to me for 3 days.
Really?
Because for some reason that was somehow my fault or something. I don't know. So that's an example.
Okay. So you're noticing this sort of contradiction of, on one hand, it might be okay for you to go get a girlfriend. On the other hand, it's really not okay for you to be in a room with a woman who's changing, even though that was not that had nothing to do with you.
Correct.
Okay. So what happens then?
So as part of the whole joke from her that I should go get a girlfriend. She also started saying, hey, if she's cute, make sure you bring her home.
Hmm.
And
Okay.
again, this is after, I don't know, 15, 17 years of marriage or something. And um, I was trying to figure out, is this like, this seems like a really weird thing to joke about. And
Hmm.
I'm completely uninterested in this. I got actually pretty upset about it a few times. And I said, that's not what I want. I want to be with my spouse. And I don't know, she kind of played it off as a joke, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it was a joke now.
Okay. Okay. So how are you feeling in the marriage at this point? Like overall, are you feeling still secure in the marriage, even though these sort of things are happening? Or are you starting to feel like the wheels are coming off? And how are you feeling towards your wife at this point, 15, 17 years in?
I I kind of feel like I felt like the wheels started coming off really, really early. There was a lot of
Mm,
conflict in the marriage. I I don't know, starting in year 2 or 3, I became very aware of a feeling like I wasn't really loved or desired.
mm,
I felt like being with me was an obligation to her, and
mm,
I starting from then I felt extremely lonely, and um, it really caused me to question my value as a husband, as a man. Um, that kind of barrier that I felt like she put up between me and our kids uh, also felt very isolating, and I felt like I was an ineffective father. Um,
mm.
as a result of this, all of that loneliness and everything, I know that I became distant. I also uh, became very resentful, and I know that that came out as some anger. Um, I know that when I would bring up those feelings, she would tell me that that was my issue, that was some childhood wound that I needed to deal with. It had nothing to do with her. She was completely fine in the relationship. And um, some other things had happened. Not to jump around, and I apologize for the timeline being
No,
so
no, that's
weird.
okay. No, it's totally all right. I think on one level, it's kind of like the timeline is less important than, at least in this interim period of the marriage, the timeline is maybe less important than the sort of pattern of behavior and experience.
Okay.
So, but I did want to ask you, at the time, how did you receive that information? Like, this is your problem. You need to go get some therapy for this versus now.
Well, at the time, I I trusted her. I trusted her opinion and her perspective, and um, she said she was perfectly fine and happy, and I felt like I must have issues. I didn't have a
Mm,
good home life growing up, and I was always well aware of that. And so I did go to therapy a number of times. I think I've been to 6 or 8 different therapists across the period of our marriage, and um, so I did get help for a number of different things, dealing with feelings and stuff like that. But when your primary relationship is built on loneliness and rejection and a lack of desire and love and reciprocation, it's hard to ever get to a good place.
right. Right, like, you can go back and do all the therapy on your past and your upbringing, etcetera, um, and do your best to be aware of those things and how those patterns come into your present, and if you've got this ongoing relationship issue that is not addressed by those things, then you've still got the elephant in the room.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so you were about to say that there were some other things too that were kind of indicative.
Yeah, so one thing that happened, and I've gone back and forth on whether I want to share this or not, but um, I I think I'm going to anyway. So as I said, I had asked her to marry me over the phone, kind of inadvertently almost. But so when she came to North Carolina and we got officially engaged, she said, "Hey, I wanted to let you know that um, there's this guy that I work with, and that I slept with him, and it didn't mean anything or whatever." And looking back, I feel really naive thinking like this, but I thought that she was just telling me, "Hey, I work with a guy, and at some point I had this fling with him, and I want you to be aware of it." And I said, "Okay, yeah, that's no big deal. Thank you for telling me." And that's where it stopped. And then a few days after we got married, she was really, really upset and crying and all this. And I asked her what was going on. And she said, "So that guy that I told you about that I slept with him, I forget the time frame now, but it was less than a week before I asked her to marry me."
Mm.
And that that just kind of blew everything up for me. Having been raised in a, not raised, but been in the church for a few years, I had really been heavily taught that, Jesus died for our sins, and I've offended God so much, and yet he was still willing to forgive me. So I should forgive anyone for anything, because they certainly haven't wronged me as much as I've offended God. And so at that point, I'm completely anti-divorce. I've vowed to share my life with this person, and I've just gotten this news and I don't know what to do with it. But I decide, well, I have to forgive her and I have to figure this out and move on. And over the years, that never went away for me. I asked her, or I told her how I was feeling a few different times, and the first couple times within the first few years, she said that it was because she didn't really understand how I felt about her, and so it just didn't register for her that we were in this huge committed relationship. And essentially made it my fault for apparently not conveying my feelings well enough. About 10 years into our marriage, it was still bothering me. I didn't bring this up all the time, but at about 10 years, I brought it up again and I said, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this. This just isn't going away for me. I've done everything that I can to figure it out and heal, but I feel like we need to talk about it." And she got very upset and said, "Okay, I guess I'm just always going to be a whore to you." And I was really kind of shocked. And I said, "That's not it at all. I'm just really struggling with the fact that this happened and I don't understand." I ended up having to drop it because that's where that conversation ended, more or less. Several years later, I talked to her about it, and I said, "I decided that I'm just going to believe you, that you didn't know, and that you made this decision. And so I'm just going to deal with it and move on." And she seemed really happy about that. It's weird, though, that it took this long. About 6 months after I ended up leaving, getting into my own place, I had the realization that it shouldn't have mattered how I felt about her. If she had feelings for me, she would never have done that. And if she had enough feelings for me to say yes to a marriage proposal, she definitely shouldn't have said that. She definitely shouldn't have done that, I mean.
Right. That's the incongruity that you were sensing all along.
Yes.
Is that if she had had feelings for you, there was no way that she could have been with someone else a week before she accepted a proposal from you.
Exactly.
Is that kind of what you're feeling?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because there's a lot of people, and I'll just say this, there's a lot of people who would say, what happens before the marriage or even the engagement is fair game, and no one should recriminate another person for something they do before they're committed to someone. And yet, sounds like you were in a dating relationship, and I think personally that makes sense. It's at least it's something that you have to scratch your head about a little bit. That if you loved me and were committed to me in terms of your feelings for me, it doesn't quite make sense or add up that you would be with someone else so closely upon the heels of accepting a proposal.
Yeah, and I think what really just didn't make any sense to me was, okay, I'm in North Carolina, thinking about you all the time, and we're talking on the phone every day, and we're talking about how much we care about each other. But then did you care, or what? Like, that experience doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, that wasn't very.
No, it's okay. Yeah. This is a thread throughout the marriage, and then there comes a point in which you go, "I'm just going to believe you and trust you, and do my best to put this issue to bed." So, what starts to happen to really then puts you on the trajectory to recognizing that you're a straight spouse?
After the pandemic started, we started having a lot more problems. We always had issues. We had a lot of conversations about our relationship and how we needed to fix things. But when we got into the pandemic and the lockdown happened, I went on a camping trip and just by myself to get away, and came back a day early. And she was extraordinarily upset that I was home. And we had a conversation, and it was basically that she was completely unhappy, and she had resigned herself to just living in a completely unhappy, unfulfilling marriage. And I think that that's a result of me feeling so much resentment and loneliness. I'm certain that I was not a pleasant person to be around some of the time. Often I don't know. Was very happy with our kids, but I frequently felt very used in the relationship. I felt like she always wanted me to work more and more, and that it was always about money. That was actually something that she said throughout our marriage, that because I didn't earn enough money for her to be at a certain level of living, she was always fearful and anxious, and so she couldn't connect with me that way. The last few years of our marriage, when I definitely was earning enough to give her the life that she wanted, I think that triggered some reflection for her, because the first year of the pandemic, as I said, she really decided she had resigned herself to an unhappy marriage. And I saw this and I said, okay, I'm going to do everything that I can to change. And I'm going to essentially take responsibility for everything. I'm not going to talk to her about anything that she's not doing, or ways that I feel unseen in this relationship. I'm just going to take responsibility for everything and do everything I can to make this a better marriage. And at the end of the year...
Just to pause on that, because I think a lot of listeners will relate. I think it's very common to have a sense of over responsibility in one partner, not just in these kinds of relationships, but not just in mixed orientation relationships, but in any relationship where there's one partner who takes over responsibility and then another partner who takes under responsibility. And I just want to point out, I think a lot of our listeners will relate to that.
All right. So yeah, I did that. I took responsibility for everything. I worked on myself. I got in therapy again. And by the end of that year, in December, she said that I had become let's see, what was it that she said? I think she said that I had become the perfect husband for her. And that she needed time to heal and deal with her own stuff from how bad our marriage had been. And then...
What did you think when you heard that? Okay, like achievement unlocked. I've become her perfect husband. Interestingly, by not having any needs or expectations from her. But did you think, okay, I did it finally, or how did that go?
Yeah, basically. I thought, in the back of my mind, I was thinking, okay, so I take the blame and responsibility for everything, even if I know that she's falling short in whatever way. Even if, yes, she just yelled at me 5 times today and I responded with a raised voice once. Yes, it's that is all my fault. I realized that was what was happening, and that was what she needed or expected from me for me to be considered a good husband. Mm-hmm. What I hoped.
What's happening to you are you becoming a smaller, diminished person, or are you is that somehow, well, this is my role as a husband, and so I'm going to do that, and then have in some sort of backdoor way, a sense of being a good husband, and I'm doing it.
What I hoped was that I had removed enough of what she was thinking was me harming her and the bad stuff coming from me. I had gotten rid of enough of that she would then hopefully work on herself and get into therapy and stuff like that and start to realize that she had her own issues and that she would work on those herself.
Okay.
And that's
a novel approach. I mean, on one hand, I have to say it's sad that it had to get to that point, but it's also kind of clever. If I remedy everything in myself, then maybe she has a chance to see that she's part of this equation too.
Yeah, I didn't do that by design, but by that point, I was just thinking, okay, well, I mean, if I've become the perfect husband, then she has to start looking at herself, right?
Right. Okay. So she did say, you've become the perfect husband for me, and I recognize now that I have to work on myself. Is that what she said?
Yeah, in a nutshell.
Basically. Okay.
And so that was in December. And then the next February, I was in our family room with all of the kids that were home. We were watching a movie, and I looked up and I noticed that she was kind of walking around the kitchen looking really sad and whatever. And so I went in and I said, "Hey, what's going on? You seem really upset." And she said, "I wish I could be friends with men and have sex with women." And that was her grand coming out to me. I said, what exactly does that mean? I need some clarification on what you're saying here. And she said she doesn't know, but she had determined that she wasn't straight. And I said, okay, so does that mean you want to get out of our marriage? Do you want to stay married? Do you want, what do you want here? And she said, no, she had already thought about that and she wanted to stay married.
And this is in 2021?
Yes.
Okay.
And I said, okay, well, if you're still committed to me and we're still going to stay married, then we'll figure this out. We'll figure out how to make this work. And over the next couple months, we had a lot of conversations about what that meant. And actually, I should jump back to March. It was about a month after that initial kind of ambiguous coming out. I asked her if she had any more information about what was going on, and she said that she thought she might be a lesbian. And I said, okay, well, that would be something that's really important to figure out, because if you are a lesbian, obviously our marriage can't work. Mm-hmm. And she dialed it back and said that she wasn't sure. And that's how it stayed until I decided that I had to leave. So for another 18 months or so, she said that she just didn't know.
Did you, during that 18 months, were you in therapy together or individually? And were you in the closet together in the sense that you hadn't really told anyone else outside the marriage?
Yes. So right when she told me that she wasn't straight, I said, I have to get into therapy. I can't deal with this just by myself. And she accepted that. She did say that she did not want anyone else to know anything about it. So the only person she was okay with me talking to about was my therapist. Okay. And so I started.
And was she in therapy then too, or no?
She didn't get into therapy for maybe another 6 months.
Okay. And so what made you decide then I have to leave after 18 months?
Well, there were a couple of factors. So maybe in my third or fourth session with my therapist, she had me do a visualization exercise where she asked me to imagine someone caring for me and wanting to meet my needs and make me happy and all that kind of stuff. She said it could be anyone, anything, whatever, didn't matter. It didn't have to be romantic or anything. And I sat on her couch for 20 minutes doing that. And at the end of that, I opened my eyes and I said, I have no idea what that would look like or feel like. I had no context to understand what it would feel like to have someone see enough value in me to care about me that way. And
got it.
So that was one thing. She said, okay, well, we're going to have to work on that. I think it was a year after I got into therapy with her that I started to actually feel like I had more value than just going to work and my wife taking all of the money and doing whatever she wanted to with it. Because that's basically what the relationship was. I was doing that. I did home projects all the time. Completely remodeled our house. I was a very involved father. I hung out with my kids a lot. I took them on camping trips every year. I loved being with my kids. But as far as the marriage relationship, I didn't have any value. And so coming to that realization after weekly therapy for a year helped. But then on about a month before my birthday, which is in October, she had asked me if I would want to go on a 3 or 4 day weekend with her for our anniversary. And I thought, okay, well, this is interesting, but I don't expect this to happen. And I said, yeah, that sounds like that would be really nice. If you wanna plan that, then that's great. And I kind of already knew that it wasn't going to happen, but that's fine. About a week before our anniversary, so that would have been our 23rd anniversary. She had said nothing else about it, so I knew nothing was going to happen. And then the Saturday of our anniversary weekend, our anniversary was on Sunday. That Saturday, she said, you know what, I think I just want to mostly spend the weekend hanging out with our new female neighbor, who later she said that she believed she was a closeted lesbian herself. She told me that she wanted to spend our anniversary weekend just hanging out with that neighbor. Mm-hmm. And that was, I don't know, 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. And I heard that, and I just all of a sudden decided that nothing was ever going to get better. And I told her that. I said, this isn't ever going to work, and I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. And we ended up having maybe a 2-hour conversation that night. And she asked for some time to figure out if she could show up in our marriage the way I needed her to. And I agreed to it because ultimately I didn't want to get a divorce. I didn't want my family to go through all of that. I definitely didn't want to put my kids through a divorce. But after that month, I was about a week before Christmas when that time was up, and she said that she can't, and she agreed to the divorce.
Okay. So, and that was in the agreement to the divorce was in 2023?
That was in the late 2022.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So now you're in divorce proceedings, game on. What happens?
Kind of. First we had already scheduled a family vacation in January to go to Florida. So we did that. The entire vacation, we were completely separate. She essentially refused to let me anywhere near the master bedroom. I slept on the couch or in one of the double beds in my kid's bedroom for the entire vacation. And we started actually talking to a therapist, but her role with us was as a coach because she was out of state, that my then wife referred us to. Like, she wanted us to go to this woman. This woman was a lesbian herself. And so she coached couples through the process of discovery and, doing whatever you do with your marriage, making it a mixed orientation marriage or an open marriage or whatever you want. And when I did the intake interview with her, I told her that my ex had just figured out that she was a lesbian. And I told my wife about that, and she said, that's not true. I've known almost the entire time since I told you I wasn't straight. And so that's when I knew that she had lied to me for an entire year and a half to keep me in the marriage. And so anyway, we met with this coach twice. And in the first meeting, the coach really paid a lot of attention to my experience and what I was going through. She advocated for me because I guess I don't know the reason, but she was very empathetic. She really tried to get my wife to understand what I was going through. And that really rubbed her the wrong way. The second time we talked, we were talking about telling the kids, because at this point the kids didn't even know. And the coach said that it would make a lot of sense to kids to tell them that their mom had realized, come to the conclusion that she was gay, and that because of that, our marriage couldn't work. And my ex then said, well, that's why he wants to get married. That's why he wants to get a divorce. That's not why I want to get a divorce. And the coach looked at her kind of funny over Zoom and said, well, why do you want to get divorced? And she said, because he's angry all the time now. And we both actually, the coach and I on Zoom, our mouths fell open and we just kind of sat there for a second. And she said, so you're telling me that as a lesbian, you're okay with staying married to a man? And she said, yeah, I'm completely fine with it. But he's angry and I don't want to deal with that anymore.
I think this is the crux of a lot of what you're pointing to is this sort of dissonance between the idea that I think a lot of husbands would report this, and I think this is where some of the listeners will be pointing to our last episode where we interviewed a late life lesbian, Anne Marie Zanzel, and the idea being that the coming out partner, the coming out wife might blame some other aspect of the marriage, and quite frankly, typically on the husband as the reason for the marriage falling apart, as opposed to the mismatch in sexual orientation. And it's kind of interesting because it's like, well, all things being equal, if he wasn't a horrible husband, as you say, if he was the most amazing husband in the world, you would still be left with this orientation mismatch. And that fundamentally is the reason why the marriage is not compatible. It's almost like this idea of, I don't want it to be because I'm gay that we're getting a divorce. Like it's a sort of a responsibility shift back onto the husband, oftentimes from what we hear. And it's really interesting. I think it's a common theme that we hear.
Yeah, it's after having talked to a few straight husbands as well, that's definitely something that I've seen as a trend. And
yeah,
it was definitely a trend throughout the whole coming out period, but also since we split up.
Right.
So
you get written off as the bad, angry husband.
Yes. And she has tried to find ways to paint me that way since our separation. We've been separated
publicly as well as to you, but publicly as well.
So she has told a few people who have brought it to my attention that she said things such as, I'm an angry and abusive husband.
The abusive one.
Yeah. I'm
right.
Yeah, I was
common trope. Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as publicly, like on social media, I don't think so. I blocked every way that I could right away. But to my knowledge, she hasn't done it that way. But yeah, to a few contacts and stuff. Yes.
So, and you mentioned that this coach that you were seeing, who was herself a lesbian, you saw her twice. So after that, essentially the second meeting where your wife said, the reason I want a divorce is because he's angry all the time. Did you not see that coach again, or?
So we got through that session, and then my wife said that she didn't want to go to her anymore. Shocker. But she kind of left it up to me to cancel things, and I never did. And then by the time I got, that wasn't by design, I just didn't get to it. I was dealing with too much stuff mentally and emotionally and stuff. And so I tried to cancel it, but I had missed the cancellation window. And so I ended up talking to her by myself one last time. And she told me that I really needed to be careful and to watch out because people with my wife's personality, um, they frequently made this kind of experience really, really difficult for everyone involved.
Okay. So I take it that's where we're headed is you're now in the divorce process. And then, well, before we kind of go there, are you still divorcing or are you divorced now
Nope,
currently?
still divorcing.
Okay. So the divorce process, you have these 2 meetings with this coach, you have another meeting yourself with her, you have when is this timing, the meetings with the coach or the last meeting with the
Okay,
coach?
so the last meeting with the coach was in, I think it was February of 2023. Yeah.
Okay. So you've been divorcing, I assume one of you filed, you or
Yes.
she?
So we got back from Florida and we had one of our coaching sessions in Florida. We had the second one when we were back in Minnesota. And we decided that I would move out. So I was doing all the preparations for that. And I moved out March 1st of 2023. And I finished my last coaching session was, I think, the week before I moved out.
Okay.
And so originally, I think the first month I was just trying to catch my breath and settle my house and stuff
Sure.
like that. And then
Sure.
in May, she was going to go to California to a cousin's wedding. And while she was there, I got phone calls from her family members saying, "Hey, what's going on? Because she's over here in California spending tons of money. And she rented this really, really great sports car. She had one of the best suites in the hotel. It was the same level of suite as the bridal suite was. I was just hearing all of this crazy stuff. And coincidentally, on the same day that I got those phone calls, a man reached out to me on Facebook Messenger. And he said, "Hey, is your wife's name this?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Are you aware that your wife and my wife are dating and spending their time together in California right now?" And I said, "Well, I know that she's in California, and I knew that she was kind of seeing someone and that she would be probably seeing her for a couple of days after the wedding, but no, I didn't know that." And he and I ended up getting on the phone and talking for, I think it was 2 or 3 hours. And this had really just come down on him like within the last couple of weeks. I had been dealing with it for 2 years. And so I mostly just listened to him talk about how he didn't understand what was happening. And one week, his wife was coming up to him and saying that she was fully committed to their marriage and making things work, and she loved him and wanted to be with him. And then another week later, she's saying, "I've met someone and I'm in love with her and I want a divorce."
Okay. And for you, finding out that your wife is in California with this woman spending a lot of money, 2 questions. I mean, number 1, do you think that she was with this woman and dating her, essentially having a relationship with her? Like, when do you think that started in the process?
So
Was it the weekend of the anniversary where she just wanted to hang out with the neighbor?
The understanding that I have from her, and I guess I don't have a reason to dispute it, is that she met this woman in a Zoom support group for gay people coming out in marriage.
Okay.
So she had known her quite a while. Apparently, she had really started communicating in a romantic way with her, I don't know, maybe a week or two after I moved out.
Okay. So it wasn't that she was necessarily having an affair during the marriage and not necessarily with that neighbor.
Correct. Yeah, I don't know any of that. So.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So, and the other thing is, so after you move out, so she's spending all this money. If someone has filed for divorce, generally the court will say, okay, no one's to spend an inordinate amount of marital money. Had someone filed by the time that she was in California and you had moved out? Okay. Got it. So she's spending on the bridal suite or something like that, and a rental car and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, she ended up staying in California for a week solid to spend with this woman. And a lot of her family members who had talked to me about this, they're like, there's no way we're going to stay there that long. It's too expensive to stay there. So, yeah, she spent all that time there. I got on the phone with an attorney immediately, and I said, hey, so this is what I'm hearing, and I can't exactly confirm it, but am I within my rights to move all of our marital assets into a separate account? And they said, yeah, if you're getting news that she's spending money, yes, you can absolutely protect your marital assets. So that's what I did. I transferred everything into new accounts. I shut everything down that I possibly could. And then I messaged her and said, hey, this is what I've heard, and this is what I've done, and we need to deal with this immediately. And I told her I was filing for divorce. And I mean, we had already talked about it, obviously. It wasn't unexpected, but she did not expect to get served papers.
Right.
But when I talked to the attorney, they told me that the only way that I can keep her from spending up everything is to actually file papers. So that's what I did.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So she didn't expect to get served papers, and obviously she probably did not react well to that.
She didn't. She especially did not react well to me shutting her out of the money, which I do very much understand, but
yeah,
I didn't know what else to do either.
But you have to protect marital assets. It's understandable that you wouldn't want to work to. Was your wife a stay-at-home mom, or did she work too?
She worked in the business that we owned, actually.
Let's just kind of catch everybody up on where things stand. I assume the divorce, since it's now a year, it's May of 2024. You moved out in March of 2023. Sounds like you filed sometime in May, maybe 2023. So it's a full year that this has been going on. What's the status of the divorce process right now?
We're just basically at a stalemate. We've gone through mediation a few times. She essentially started off by saying that she wanted spousal support, child support. She wanted to keep the house. She wanted to have me basically absorb all debts and everything else. And so essentially she wanted everything, and she wanted to stick me with everything that was difficult. And we've talked about that a number of times. I think collectively we've spent over $50,000 trying to get some movement, and she just won't really engage with things.
Did she want full custody, or did she expect 50-50 custody?
She expected 50-50.
So then she shouldn't, well, I'm not a lawyer, but I would imagine that if it's 50-50 custody, then child support is not
correct
necessarily okay. Yeah. So you're at a stalemate, and are you, mediation has failed a few times. Are you planning on going to court, or what are you thinking?
I don't know how that's going to work. We have a hearing coming up
Yeah.
actually next week to
Okay.
tell the court what's going on. And I guess we'll see what happens.
Okay. Well, is there anything else? I want to thank you for sharing your story. I know that there's going to be a lot of men in particular who can relate to aspects of your story. Is there anything else you want to share? Because you're going through it right now. Like, often we interview people who are a couple years out, but you're really going through it. You're still in the middle of it. And is there anything else, given that you want to add or make sure that our listeners hear?
There's so many things. I would want people to realize that if you have a fundamental incongruity like this, and you're not someone who, if you're someone who needs connection in your relationship, this is, in my opinion, very unlikely to work. I think most of us initially start out by being very supportive of our spouse and trying to help them get through this crisis of identity. And I have a ton of empathy and compassion for that. But we often try to find a way to make it work. And that's not likely, in my opinion. I hope people will value themselves and see that they matter and that they deserve to be loved and cared for and considered in things. This isn't just about your spouse's experience. Your experience matters too.
Right. And there's very little, I agree with you. My opinion is that in the majority of cases, it's difficult to make something like this work without both parties mangling themselves in the process. And the statistics that we have from, 20 or so years ago when Amity Buxton did her research, it was something like maybe 1/6 of original couples make it in some kind of long-term relationship or figure out how to make that arrangement work for them. I don't know if those statistics would still hold if research were done today, but so yeah, it's just I appreciate that point that you have a right to be loved, desired, or a right to want that. Let's put it this way: a right to want to be loved, desired, and your relationship reciprocated.
Absolutely.
And you're writing a book, or you're working on a book. So tell us a little bit about that.
I am. So what I'm doing is I'm interviewing fellow straight spouses about their experience. And originally I was thinking, okay, I'll write a book about my own experience. But first of all, it's one person and it's one life. And while I actually don't feel like my experience is terribly interesting, but I guess the way I look at it is this is an experience that has happened to so many people, and I don't want the culture at large to be able to say, well, yeah, most of the time it works out just fine, because that's what we see in media and shows and stuff like that.
Right. Right.
The overwhelming majority of the time, it's extraordinarily difficult, and someone, usually the straight spouse, from what I can see, really gets wrecked. And I want people to understand what we go through. I want people who are questioning their sexuality or who already know that they are LGBT, but they are in a heterosexual marriage, to try to understand what this process will do to the person that they have said that they loved, and treat them with some kindness and empathy and compassion. And ideally, I would really love friends and family and people who are outside of the experience to understand what we go through a little bit and maybe avoid some of those awful questions that we get asked, and understand that, no, we didn't know. We didn't enter this willingly. We had our rights and our agency to have the kind of marriage we wanted taken away by someone who was trying to hide their true identity. And that's not right.
Well, I know that listeners are going to be eagerly awaiting and looking for that book as soon as as soon as it comes into fruition. And we hope you'll keep us updated on that. And then we also hope you'll keep us updated on the divorce. And I'm sure I speak for our listeners when I say that we wish you the best of luck for a speedy and fair resolution to your divorce.
That would be ideal for sure.
Yeah. Well, Wade, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. It's been a pleasure to have you, and we just wish you so much luck.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It's been great talking to you.
I want to thank our listeners for tuning in today. Please be on the lookout for all new episodes as they come out. Right now, I seem to be on a schedule of dropping on the first of every month. So we hope you'll keep abreast of new episodes around that time. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. This is a friendly reminder that the views of the host, yours truly, are not necessarily the views of Our Path or its board of directors. I want to thank our engineer and editor, Adam, right here at Play Audio Agency in Cincinnati, Ohio. And until next time, this is your host reminding you, keep using your voice.